Cinesmack contains spoilers of the spoiling type. If you don't want your spoilers spoiled, please turn back now. Otherwise, enjoy the show!
Gentlemen, let's broaden our minds. Lawrence?
Ladies and gentlemen! Welcome to the main event! This is Cinesmack! And the winner is...
Hello, Cinesmacketeers, and welcome to bout number 71 of the podcast about films by filmmakers. I am your host, Mike Keeler. Joining me tonight is our panel of award-winning judges. First, filmmaker and owner of Cheshire Moon Films, Tom Haggis.
Hey, that's me. How's it going, everybody?
Hey, Tom.
Oh, God.
You all right?
I just want to get to the smacking because I got some stuff
right,
to say.
all right.
Let's get going.
Second, filmmaker and owner of One Genome Short Productions, Gabriel Rowald.
Happy New Year, Cinesmacketeers.
Happy New Year, Gabe.
Thank you.
Third, writer, actor, and one of our new additions to the show's panel. He's signed a billion-year contract with us,
Oh boy.
Kyle Fine.
Well, hello. I'm going to die way before that contract ends.
Well, we get your soul, too, for however long.
You can have it. It's not worth much.
And
You've been watching A&E or something.
are you talking about the Scientology?
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Because they
that's-
signed a billion-year contract.
Yeah, it kind of came to my head,
my
but
God.
that was actually I haven't watched. No, I take that back. I actually watched one of those episodes, Leia Remini or whatever her name is.
Leah Remini or whatever.
Yeah, whatever her name is.
Mhm.
Yeah, it just kind of stuck in my head. I'm like, a billion-year contract, huh? All right. Made Kyle
A
sign
long
it.
time.
Our fourth panelist is actually missing his first show due to illness. God.
Classic.
But we wish Tosh a speedy recovery, and I'll have his picks at the end of the bout. So, yeah, guys, I am super stoked about this. I'm always excited when we record, but I just have to say, I watched both these movies yesterday. Yeah, and just had 4 hours of joygasm the entire time I watched it. So let's poke the monkey, and he'll let us know what we're actually talking about.
Ladies and gentlemen, cops and crooks, welcome to the main event! Tonight, two legendary Hong Kong action films battle in a ballet of bullets. It's a double feature of Ric Flair's favorite director, John Woo! In the first quarter from 1989, written and directed by John Woo, starring Chow Yun-fat, Danny Lee, and Sally Ye, a killer! In the second quarter from 1992, written by Barry Wong and John Woo, also directed by John Woo, starring Chow Yun-fat, Tony Leung, and Teresa Mo. Hard boiled!
Boy, he had some problems with those names. He actually has been texting me. So, all right. Let's move on to our first round, which is writing.
Oh, God. No, I have to start this whole thing? That's my
Yeah.
first time.
Yeah,
Oh, Lord.
it's in the contract.
I should have read that shit. That fine print is going to kill me.
Mm-hmm.
So, both movies written mostly by John Woo with some help. I mean, I think there was a screenplay by someone else on Hard Boiled.
There was.
To begin with. Right. So, but I feel like he probably had quite a bit of influence. I read a little bit about a lot of it being made up kind of on the fly, and some of the scenes even being shot before the script was finished.
Yes.
Nice.
So they have very, I think, similar feels in that they're John Woo movies. The first one I feel is more a personal story about a man, trying to do good with his life, what he has left of it after he's seen himself go down this dark path. The second movie, Hard Boiled, I don't know why I'm not using the titles of the movie, is more, it seems to me more like institutional problems. Like, he had personal issues with people, but couldn't tell between the good guys and the bad guys. And in both cases, I think the most attention was paid, obviously, to the action scenes. And kind of for me, everything in between was just filler.
Yeah.
It was just kind of connective tissue getting from one place to the other. So I'm not really sure how to gauge these in terms of writing. I mean, the stories were serviceable to move things along, but I don't know how deep they were, how much they really connected with me. It just seemed like a platform to move along. I felt like the story in Hard Boiled was much more grand in scope, and I feel like a lot of that work behind the scenes when you're talking about writing and pacing and beats and things like that was really done by John Woo, and the way he kind of crafted the film and directed it and got us from action scene to action scene, and that's where all the heavy lifting in the movie comes from. So, I'm not quite sure how I feel about the writing on both these movies right off the top. I'd like to hear what you guys think about it.
Well, I'll start out. I mean, the killer feels more personal, where Hard Boiled, like you said, is more this grand scheme of things, like that. John Woo's trying to say something about the society at the time, right. And the killer is more or less about, like what you said, a man that has been doing horrible things for a majority of his life, and he just, like he said, he's like, that's the one good thing that I've done, and he goes, I want to do it. I want to see it to fruition. I promised her, and
right. And
sorry,
he has this affinity I read about, for he glorified gangsters in his early movies, made them very cool and slick, and got some flack for that. And I'd read that some of the thoughts behind Hard Boiled was that he was trying to make a movie to glorify police, because he had gotten some shit for glorifying bad guys forever. But the story of like a killer with a heart of gold or a conscience, is an old kind of trope story. But I feel like I'm not sure how much it connected with me in The Killer. Hard Boiled just seemed to go more into that, look, we know you're here for the action. Right. We're going to get you from point A to point B, and the stuff in between is you can watch it and then just wait. It won't be very long before a gunfight breaks out.
Right. Well, and one of the things that I wondered about, which may make it difficult for us to evaluate the writing on movies like this, is that it's really kind of written again. There's the old adage that a movie is written 3 times, once when the screenplay is written, once when it's filmed, and once when it's edited. Well, when it's a foreign film that's been subtitled, you could add maybe a 4th time to that. Yeah. And I wondered, one of the things that I felt was not very strong in either of these, and kind of bothered me a little bit, is the dialogue really wasn't that good. But I wondered how much of that was a result of translation. If I could have understood it in the original, Chinese, would I have appreciated the dialogue a little bit better?
I don't think you would have.
That's my. I think you're right, and that's my impression of it. But I do wonder what impact translation has in those kinds of things. If it, I don't know. Maybe the translation actually improved it. It's hard to say.
That's extremely possible, and I mean, you also have to add into that 4th edit whether it's subtitled or dubbed. Because I used to watch these films back in high school, and I had them on VHS, and I had the dubbed copies.
Right.
So,
the dubbed version would have an impact on acting to a certain degree.
Oh, absolutely.
Writing and acting. Yeah.
I mean, I really gonna base them I mean, this category, base it on the story itself, and the killer redemption story. I think is, I mean, like Kyle said, I think it's just kind of, it's more than just moving from violent scene to violent scene and move through it. I do think we should have put the killer up against City Lights. I think that would have been really interesting, seeing how the plot's very similar in both of them.
Yeah.
About the guy that.
Oh my God, that's true. I didn't even think about that.
Doesn't tell the blind girl, and then oh my God, it's you. And then he helps her get her vision back. So,
Right.
but he doesn't because he doesn't have eyes anymore.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll just say off the bat, I didn't really like either one of them, and part of that is that I was really excited to see these because I've heard so many great things about them, and my expectations were very high. And well, some of the. I mean, you guys have to explain it to me, but some of the action scenes were great, but we'll talk about that when we get to directing anyway. Let's stick to story. So anyway, story-wise, I thought the redemption story was a little bit more thought out. I was surprised that the killer came after Hard Boiled.
No, it didn't.
Or the killer came before, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The killer came before Hard Boiled because I felt like while Hard Boiled, the action scenes were bigger and the explosions were bigger and everything else, I thought that the killer was more mature, that it was a little bit more disciplined, whereas Hard Boiled was just like, let's see how big we can make everything. So I thought that in watching them that the killer had come second, and it didn't. But on the other hand, I guess you do the killer and then you're like, let's do it again, but let's do it bigger.
Right.
So anyway, that's my thought on it.
Yeah, and I think I was reading when I was putting together all my trivia for both these films that in Hard Boiled, they actually cut out a lot of the scenes where Tequila was talking. There were more scenes with him and his girlfriend, the one that works at the police station, which actually flushed more of that out. And they actually cut that out because they were running over on time. So yeah, and I think I agree with you guys. I think that hurt Hard Boiled. It was more of the what they call them, the super cop. Trying to take down the bad guys.
Yeah.
And I think they could have handled a little bit more of the fact that Tequila figures out they shot a cop, and he's having trouble with his girlfriend and his love life. And it just, I think if that would have been in there, I think maybe it could have done a little better. But let's face it, I didn't watch that movie for a love story or anything like that. Now, The Killer, on the other hand, it's just the writing for me is it's very it's kind of a tragedy. If you think about it, he's trying to do good and he ends up blind. He gets shot in the eyes. She's not going to be able to use his eyes for for the cornea implants or transplants or whatever. And the cop, the good cop, ends up killing someone right in front of all these other cops. And I mean, I know right now we're sitting in 2017 in America and it's not 1989 Hong Kong. So I don't know how that would have been dealt with if that would have happened. I would think that, quite possibly he would probably see some jail time or prison time or whatnot. But to me, it's just kind of a tragedy because John dies and the good cop, kills someone in front of all these other cops in full blood.
I kind of felt too at the end of Hard Boiled. I mean, when they gets to the hospital, I kind of felt like, first of all, I wasn't sure why they would hide their guns in the basement of a hospital. I thought that was kind of weird. And
who would look there? That's
exactly
the whole thing. It works.
No,
who would think of it?
Okay, but at the same time, I was watching it and I feel like the crew were like, "Hey, we got our hands on a hospital," and we're like, "All right, well, we'll say the bad guys hid their guns at a hospital." like they got permission to blow something up, and then they wrote the story backwards from that point.
Well, it's funny you bring that up. The hospital stuff originally, the plot for Hard Boiled was this cop going after this crazy guy that is poisoning milk for children, like children's formula. He's poisoning it. So they had already kind of booked the hospital. And I have trivia, and I'll explain that all. But yeah, originally the plot was this crazy guy that is poisoning infant formula and killing babies.
Well, babies did play a large role.
They did.
Jesus, there was a lot of babies in this
They
movie.
did.
Yeah, I know. There were more babies in that hospital.
And I own the greatest movie poster ever, and it's Chow Yun-fat holding a shotgun and a really fat baby. It's
Yeah, that's
fantastic.
pretty good.
All right, you guys want to put it to a vote? Do you have anything else to say on writing?
I'm good.
I guess I had
thought
one other-
something. Sorry.
Go ahead, Kyle. Go.
I was just thinking about the subtitles. Part of that issue too is that we don't live in the same culture, so some of the references they make, of course, are going to fly right over our heads. The nicknames they give each other, don't quite make sense to us. Some of that is just inevitable when you watch a foreign film.
Oh yeah.
And when I felt like the what do you call it? A translation, right? Maybe didn't do a great job of clearing that up. It just seemed more like a literal translation of what they were saying at times. And my translations had clear typos in them.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not sure how much care was taken with those things. That might have affected what we thought about these movies, because without seeing them like perfectly dubbed or translated to make more sense to a Western audience, it's kind of hard to completely judge what the intent was,
And
from the script.
right, and I've seen some bad translations of both films, but luckily I own the Criterion edition, which I didn't
fancy.
really notice any subtitle errors, but I was really into both movies at the time. So, Gabe, what'd you have to say?
And I was gonna also talk about a lot of the dialogue. A lot of the dialogue seemed very kind of like schoolyard. What I wrote down here was that a lot of the dialogue, especially in The Killer at the end, when the cop and the assassin are kind of hanging out and becoming buddies, there was this kind of weird homoerotic schoolyard friendship thing going on. Like, will you be my friend? Can we be friends? And it was just, it seemed very sophomoric. And that's probably at the point where it's like, was it written this way, or is the translation making this weird? Because there was a strange, like, these guys were a little bit too worried about being friendly with each other, and I thought that it was just a little bit too direct, the writing, because like if you're like becoming friends, like when guys are becoming friends with each other, they do a little bit more of what happened in Hard Boiled, where they kind of poke fun at each other, and and they kind of tell these like mean jokes about each other, but it's really because they're friends and they're just ribbing each other,
Right.
But I felt like The Killer was a little bit too kind of like in your
On the
face, like,
nose.
yeah, please be my friend. Will we be able to be friends after this? That kind of stuff.
Right.
And I thought it was a little weird.
Gabe,
What?
will you
What?
be my friend?
Yes. Will you be my friend? Can we be friends?
No.
Please? Can we be friends?
Sure. After this, though.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Let's put it to a vote, guys. Kyle.
I'm going to go with The Killer, just because I felt like it had a sharper sort of through line and was more consistent in the story it wanted to tell. It was also kind of a much simpler story. Hard Boiled kind of blew up and got bigger and bigger and bigger. And so I'm going to go with it for that reason.
All right. Gabe.
I'm torn. I think I'm going to go with Hard Boiled, because I thought the dialogue was a little bit better in comparison to The Killer, and they went big and they went for it.
All right. Tom.
I'm probably gonna go with The Killer for the same reasons Kyle said.
Okay. And I'm going to agree with Tom and Kyle and go with The Killer as well.
I thought we were going to be friends.
I said after this.
Oh,
He did say no at first, remember?
jeez.
All right, here's some trivia for you. Writing of Hard Boiled, the production stopped for a month after the filming of the tea house sequence due to script problems. Wu was having problems with Tony Leung's character. He wanted to show how far he felt HK, Hong Kong society, had fallen, and thus originally Leung's character was to be a psychotic villain based on a real-life psycho who poisoned baby formula. However, even though Leung was willing to do the role, Chow Yun-fat felt the role would be bad for Leung's career and urged Wu to change the script. Wu agreed and had his friend Barry Wong do a rewrite. Wong died before he could finish the script, so Wu had to complete the script during filming. And the scene at the jazz bar after the tea house shootout was added on the last day of shooting. Chow Yun-fat wanted to have a scene that showed his real-life friendship with John Woo. The scene was scripted and shot in less than an hour. And as it was previously stated, most of the action scenes were improvised. So, yeah, I remember watching that scene and I'm like, that kind of looks like John Woo. And of course, this was like pre-internet that I was watching it. And I never realized it until much later in another viewing that, oh my God, that is John Woo.
Which scene was that?
The bartender at the club, that is John Woo.
They even calls him Mr. Wu.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, he does?
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, they didn't even have time to change his name.
I guess some of that went over my head, but now that you say it, he did look familiar to me.
And writing for The Killer, John Woo improvised all the action sequences on set with actors, stuntmen, and stunt director. He never used storyboards, partly to prevent his ideas from being stolen and partly because, according to the DVD commentary, he prefers to work as an artist like a painter. I want to show where my mood takes me. When Wu planned non-action scenes, he often changed things at the last minute. For instance, most of the dialogue in the apartment when Sidney double-crosses Jeff was improvised. There you go. Let's move on to our second round, which is acting.
I'm completely shocked that this movie was put together with so much improv and not planning. So, the acting. Look, I love Chow Yun-fat, and one of the reasons I thought I was really going to enjoy these movies is because I really like him. And the American John Woo movies I've seen, I like them, so I'm not a John Woo snob. Mm-hmm. So I was looking forward to getting back and watching these again, or watching them for the first time and seeing kind of where John Woo would come from. For the acting, I thought Chow Yun-fat was actually pretty good, and it's pretty hard to act natural when all of the bullets and stuff are flying around you. But in both movies, I felt like if I was being shot at, I would like Chow Yun-fat to be close by.
Agreed. Totally agreed.
He could very calming, and it's like he shows up and suddenly bad guys can't shoot very well. The rest of the actors in the movie, I mean, there wasn't usually when we do this, we always find like one or two supporting actors that there's like, oh my gosh, weren't they really great? And I didn't really get anybody like that in this movie, either of these movies. I thought Jenny was not very good. Usually blind people don't look around so much. She looked around a lot, I thought. And I mean, so I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I'm with you. I like Chow Yun-fat. I've enjoyed him in a number of movies, and I've always thought he was a pretty cool character. And I had seen both of these movies previously, some time ago, and actually my recollection of them was I remembered liking them more than I ended up liking them this time around. And maybe they just haven't aged that well. And, we're fed so much of this kind of action stuff, and it's getting so much better. And these, the stunts and the visual effects and all that kind of things are getting so much better that maybe it makes these age a little poorly. But I didn't feel like any of the acting in any of them was really very strong. Chow Yun-fat does okay, but then there were certain times where I thought he kind of handballed it and went overboard a little bit. Like at the end of The Killer, when he's when they're crawling around, he's blinded and they're crawling around and they're trying to find each other. And then when he dies at the end, it's very kind of like melodramatic, kind of like flop kind of thing. And I'm like, I expected it to be a little more subtle.
Well, and I think I really wish they would have cut like when he was still kind of holding, he like pauses, still holding on to the straw or whatever is out there, before he does the flop. I really feel like that would have been a good cut point for that. Right. Just because, he's kind of frozen, still looking for her instead of collapsing. But yeah, I agree. The flop was the flop I could have done without.
Right. And so I felt like at times he handled a lot of that stuff well, like you said, Tom, but other times I felt like it was a little melodramatic a little bit. And in Hard Boiled, when he's having the arguments with his boss and that kind of stuff, it just didn't work well for me, for either of them. Because what does he say when he's like, I forget the last thing he says before he storms out of the office in the one argument, but it was kind of funny. And I'm like, the delivery just didn't seem good. And I was like, this was not very convincing that there was this tension here, So I don't know. I didn't feel like there were really any performances that stood out in any of these. The babies were pretty awesome. They did
a great job.
Yeah, they were good. They're great as babies.
Was that really the best way? Oh, go ahead.
No, sorry. We're kind of still pretty quiet for a gunfight going on around them. I expect a lot more wailing and screaming.
True.
I'm going to test it out when we have our kid. Take him to the range and, put cotton balls in his ears.
Yeah, set off a few explosions nearby.
Yeah.
See if he can pee out a fire.
When they were crying at the end of the when they were crawling around on the ground at the end of the killer, and she was like, Ajang, and I'm like, he's right there. Like they were like 6 inches away. Could he not hear?
I don't know. And if he was in shock or I don't know. But I agree.
Shock is always the one to go to, so that's pretty good. Okay.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree with you guys. I feel, Chow Yun-fat, for me, the replacement killers, just how he speaks. I love how he talks, how he speaks English. It's just so smooth and to the point. Like, I don't know. There's something about it. And, I loved him from these films and A Better Tomorrow and all the John Woo movies I could handle in high school. And seeing him in Replacement Killers, and then when John Woo, which you already discussed, we'll talk about that in directing. But I've always liked Chow Yun-fat, and I think I'm with Tom. If there's ever a gunfight going on around me, I really hope Chow Yun-fat is on my side. Because, there's someone that, it's in my trivia, but a man that does not like violence. He detests violence, but can look so cool performing acts of violence is just astonishing to me.
He's very calm, cool, collected, never misses a shot, and never gets shot. So lucky for him. He'd be I think if you're next to Chow Yun-fat in a fight, you're getting shot.
That's true. You got a good point.
Right.
Because he's going to get out of the way.
Yeah.
He's faster than bullets. I think these aren't really super. The Hard Boiled isn't necessarily a super cop movie. It feels like a superhero movie. Mm. The things he does, he seems psychic at points. The way he can figure out who murdered people and how. He has uncanny ability to roll out of the way of bullets. And just on the acting tip, rolling is apparently the chosen method of movement among assassins and super cops, because everybody rolls in these movies. Yeah. They roll and roll and roll and roll. They roll head over heels. They somersault. They flip into things, sometimes unnecessarily. That struck me, like the amount of times I saw someone rolling around on the ground. And I don't know anyone who's fast enough to roll away from bullets. I know that's kind of an action movie thing that happens, but it happens so many times in these movies that it's noticeable. And the blind woman, I'm with kind of Tom on that one. The blind woman was kind of annoying, and I know kind of would speak more to writing, but the convenience of her blindness was incredibly frustrating. How blind she was at some points, and then not being able to see anything 3 inches in front of her face while two guys are holding guns at each other just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Yeah, I don't know.
All right. Anything else on acting? I think we're all agreeing on this. All right.
But we got to pick one though. That's the problem.
Yeah, we gotta pick one.
Yeah, Tom, you're first up.
Oh crap. I'm gonna give it to Hard Boiled because there were no babies.
And
There were babies.
There were.
Well, there were.
babies.
No, I'm sorry. I'm going to
Baby-
give it to Hard Boiled for the babies. See, I
Okay.
can't even
For
tell
the
these
babies.
movies. They've all just blended together now.
Kyle.
Oh my god.
I'll give it to Hard Boiled. I like the supporting cast a little bit more in Hard Boiled.
Okay. Gabe.
Yeah,
my
I
friend
think I think the acting had improved a little bit by Hard Boiled overall. So I'm going to go with Hard Boiled too.
Well, I'm going with Hard Boiled because I love tequila. The drink and the cup.
Was that a tequila drink he was making?
I believe so. I looked it up a while ago,
Yeah.
and I can't remember.
It was tequila and Schweppes. I've
There you
never
go.
heard of tequila and tonic, but
Huh.
apparently it's a thing.
And
Also,
then
I've never
is
seen
there
anyone
something-
mix it by slamming it on a table
I
before.
know
either.
it's the most
Is
badass
that the way to
thing.
do it?
Well, I mean, once in his life, he's cut the shit out of his hand doing that. Just so you know, he's
Yeah.
broken a cheap glass.
Yep.
I mean,
Who he has a Chow Yun Fat.
no,
No.
I just imagine it once in Tequila's life, he slammed a little.
Oh,
too
that
hard.
guy. Oh,
But
that
he's
character.
Superman, so it doesn't matter.
That's right.
I mean,
Right.
the glass would miss him.
Yeah, that's right.
Acting in The Killer, the scene where Jeff beats up Jenny's would-be attackers in the alley was tough for Chow Yun-fat, who doesn't like violence, like I mentioned earlier. Director John Woo wanted hard hits, but Chow had trouble at first. According to after some coaching from Woo, Chow was able to muster up anger to make the scene more convincing. In fact, it became too convincing as the stuntmen had to tell Chow to pull his punches a bit after one of them got hurt. Chow got hurt himself during the filming of the church shootout when a piece of plaster cut his face, missing his eye by an inch. You can see the cut during the part where Jeff and Lee talk before leaving the church. And
I wonder how many other people got hurt filming these movies.
Oh, well,
because
no.
some of the stuntmen are doing ridiculous things.
yeah, and
Absolutely insane things, especially in The Killer. Hard Boiled seems much more choreographed, but in The Killer, when guys are falling down pews, some of the spills they're taking, ways they're falling into things just look so unsafe.
Well, Tony Leung actually had a cut on his eye from a piece of glass that flew out during the hallway scene, like in the hospital, and you can actually see the point where it happens because his hand goes up and the camera cuts. You know, it cuts to a different scene, and he actually was only off for one day, and he came back. But most of the people in The Killer, a lot of the people in The Killer at the church scene were friends and family of the crew and the actors. So could you imagine showing up on set, be like, okay, we're going to
Be
shoot
the
shit out.
last time I'm in your movie. Some of that stuff was insane to me.
Yeah, I guess
Stuntmen
in the
falling.
acting category, we should give a shout out to the stunt.
Oh, absolutely.
folks. That's really one thing that that's one thing that is amazing in both of these movies because of the
Yeah,
crazy
the
shit they
stuntmen
do.
were absolutely nuts. And speaking of stuntmen, originally Philip Chung Fung Kwok, who played Mad Dog, was not supposed to have an acting role in the film, instead just working as the action director. But John Woo was a fan of Kwok's acting work from the 70s, and he felt Johnny Wong would not project enough of a real threatening presence, so he wrote in the character of Mad Dog and offered Kwok the part. Philip Chang, who plays Inspector Chang, was a real-life police commander in the Hong Kong police who actually did supervise undercover officers like the Tony character. So he has real-life experience for that. All right, let's move on to our third round, which is directing.
Okay, well, this is interesting because in this instance, it's obviously the same director for
Right.
both. So, I guess we have to evaluate, his progress as a director, maybe between the two films. Now, one of the things that that's obvious from any John Woo film is, there's two things that really, really stand out. Well, three. Birds he has a fascination with birds, in particular doves. And I'm not quite sure what that fascination comes from. And at one point, you feel like you want them to be symbolic, and maybe they are, but they appear so often and in so many different situations that you wonder if they've lost their symbolic value at some point. He's a huge fan of slow motion.
Yep.
I think if these movies had no slow motion in them, they would literally be half as long because there's so much slow motion and some freeze frame stuff. I noticed too. There were these weird, almost sometimes awkward kind of freeze frame situations where it would freeze, and I guess we're used to that. We're used to that meaning something. It's usually some sort of a transition to another scene or something. Whereas sometimes it didn't really happen. There would be a freeze frame, and then it would cut to the other guy in the same shot at the same time, and then he would freeze, and then it would go back to the scene that they're still in, and you're like, what's going on? Why are they freezing? Why are we freeze framing these particular expressions? I'm not sure I understand. And then the third thing is, of course, is just crazy, ridiculous, over the top action sequences, which I think is probably his bread and butter. I mean, that's who he is. That's what's made him who he is. And I don't know very many movies that he's done that don't have those kinds of things in it. So, those are definite hallmarks for a John Woo film. And I guess, we have to give him a lot of credit for directing those action sequences. That would be really hard. Although I'm not sure that, on one hand, doing them kind of spontaneously might give you an advantage, and it might allow him to kind of go with his mood at the time, like he said.
Right.
But on another hand, you've got to be careful because you might end up with something that you can't cut together that's cohesive.
Right.
That makes sense and moves the story forward.
Yeah, you got to keep that all in your head.
Yeah. Somehow keep that in your head or keep it in the notes or something so that you know that, okay, well, this guy was here and this guy was here, and then when we cut to the next shot, it still makes sense.
I don't know, because when I watched these two movies, I feel like he didn't do that. I feel like
I feel like he didn't as well. And that's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
They recropped and they zoom in on shots and they use slow mo when slow mo doesn't really make a lot of sense, and those freeze frames, and it's just like I was like, he's not directing to edit. I think his editor was very good to pull a watchable movie out of this and something that people consider a classic. I think the editor gets more credit than John Woo does, especially if he's not choreographing these things beforehand. I mean, if you're just doing it on set and shooting coverage and putting trying to assemble the pieces later, that's kind of my biggest problem with him, is that, I mean, it seems like it was just chaos on set when I watch his movies.
Right. Well, and that's his only advantage, really, is that it is to have that kind of chaos, because then it's hard to keep track of. You can't pick out all of the continuity errors and that kind of thing because it's chaos. And something like at the beginning of Hard Boiled, they're in that tea room with birds. And I don't understand that. That's a cultural thing that I don't understand, because that was clearly a reference to something that they actually do, I assume. That is that they go into a tea room and they have birds at their table while they're drinking tea.
Ugh.
Yeah, it seems a little weird. But anyway, that whole tea room scene, I'm like, who is who? Who are the cops? Yeah. Who are the mobsters? What is going on? Who are these people? And then when the fighting erupts, it's like, I can't tell what's going on. And how could they tell? Actually, at the end of Hard Boiled, I thought it was interesting that they had a scene where the guy accidentally shoots another cop. And I thought, well, shit, that should have been happening pretty much like 80% of the time in some of these scenes, because you can't tell who's who. And I have to say that I'm not saying that because it's not a racist thing. I'm not saying that because they're all Asian. I'm saying that because there's so much chaos, and they're all dressed kind of the same, and it's like I don't know who these characters are,
I'm right with you on that. I think that is maybe a product of wanting to start that film fast. You know, that scene comes pretty early, and The Killer had a shootout scene pretty early in it. And when you see it go to Hard Boiled, it's like he upped the stakes, because the shootout in the beginning of The Killer was kind of spectacular for being that early in the movie, knowing, you know, when it was, and it just turns violent all of a sudden. And there's some cool moments in it. But then in Hard Boiled, he's just like, I'm just going to turn this to 11. And they just went absolutely nuts in that tea house. And I had absolutely no idea what was going on. I mean, his partner dies. We don't care. We didn't know him for 10 seconds. I mean, they showed his face 4 or 5 times in Chow Yun-fat covered in flour after shooting some guy's face in, and then holding his hand. But there's no emotional stake in that at all. We have no idea who that guy is. And I know the kind of point of that movie is the line between the cop and the criminal is blurring, and we don't know who's undercover, who's working for who. You might shoot a cop, you might shoot a criminal, who's in the gang, who's not, etc. But I don't think it serves the story when we can't know, because we have absolutely no idea who any of these people are before you start shooting them. Like, there's like no setup, no introduction. We don't know who this partner is or anything like that. And so some of that stuff is just crazy chaotic. And that's when I kind of talk about all of it just feeling like connective tissue from action scene to action scene. I'm not sure how important any of that stuff maybe is at the time when John Woo's thinking of all these crazy things in his brain, you know, like how much work gets put into those things. But when I watched them, and I knew they were 3 years apart, and I knew that Mike let me borrow Hard Boiled years and years ago. And I remember it just like you, Gabe, enjoying it a lot more then. And it just doesn't age as well because we've seen so much stuff in between. But I imagine in 89 and 92, these action scenes were kind of game changers. Nothing looked like that. And they were so long and so, like you said, chaotic and insane in some points that it can't help but like take your breath away sometimes, especially the long shot in the hospital where you realize it's like one long take. Oh, yeah. They get in the elevator, they come out, and the sets change. Like, that's astonishing. For the time and, you know, the technology that was available and stuff. So John Woo knows how to direct action. And I mean, he kind of rewrote, I think, some of these rules back then. But we've seen so much since then that it's hard to watch these now and put them in their proper place and time.
Oh, yeah. You have a lot.
So many things he's inspired, I'm sure, going forward.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you have a lot of directors that have been inspired by John Woo films, you know, trying to pull off the John Woo look. But one thing I like about his films, and I don't know if it's because I've seen him so much, but I mean, I get a lot of flack because I am a Michael Bay fan, and an old Michael Bay fan, like his older movies, where John Woo, you can tell what's going on. Like, you have a geography of the place. You kind of know the surroundings, and you know what's going on. Not necessarily can you tell who's who, like in the tea house scene, and I'll agree with you, it's very confusing unless you've seen it multiple times. You're like, oh, that's a bad guy, that's a bad guy. But his use of being able to place a camera and giving you a sense of geography where certain people are, I think is what gives him an advantage. And like, unlike Michael Bay, who, you know, quite honestly cuts every, you know, 5 seconds or whatnot, there's always that joke out there.
He's there's no shot that's ever lasted 5 seconds.
Right. It's shorter. But there's a great correlation with that. You know, you watch these John Woo films where some of the scenes are longer, and I'm not talking about the long scene, you know, the one-shot scene. I'm talking about some of the other action scenes. They're just long enough to keep you excited and let you know what's going on, and then they cut to something else. Where in modern day action films, like from the U.S., you get a lot of hyper cutting, you know, because said actor can't do the stunts, said actor can't, you know, get the fight choreography, so they cut around that. You know, there's always the up close cameras, there's always the you know, usually like 3 cameras on them, all different angles, all certain focal length, and they can cut in between those to make it look like an intense fight scene. Where watching like Hard Boiled and The Killer, like, that's brutal, you know, it's just kind of hanging in there. And with the slow-mo, I agree, there are certain parts where you're like, okay, I don't need that slow-mo, but no one out there knows how to extend an action scene that would probably take 2 minutes, but he can extend it out to longer to actually make it so you see what's going on and you can, I don't want to say enjoy the violence, but take part in that, where it's slowed down, slowed down, sped up, slowed down. He was kind of doing that before a lot of people were, like The Matrix or Michael Bay. Let's put it there. So I don't know. I think Woo is a pioneer as far as action films are concerned. He knows he knows he's cutting to certain things, and I don't think it's all the editor, because from what I've read, Woo likes to sit on the editing, and he makes sure that they, hit certain points that he knows that are in those reels and what he has. And it's not just this hyper cutting that we get today. Anyone else?
Silence.
Damn, dude. Jeez.
We're just listening to you give an essay about John Woo.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I am a huge fan of him, and I love these films, and I've always wanted to be able to do a film like that, but I know that I probably will never be able to, as much as I want to. And I suffer from, some of those fast cuts, that I rail against, but there's just something about it, the monkey calls it a ballet of bullets, and it is. I mean, it's kind of a dance of death, when it comes to these shootout scenes. That some of them are just absolutely brilliant, as far as camera angles, as far as what the actors and the stuntmen are doing, the practical effects in there. And of course, we all know that everything's dubbed. Like, they never use microphones on set. Everything is dubbed in. Sound effects, everything.
All of the dialogue? And
yes,
it's
I
was going to say it seemed very ADR at times.
It's kind of a Hong Kong tradition. I mean, you go way back to all the Kung Fu films. They figured out that if you don't have sound on set, you can move quicker. You can get more shots done. And you go in and do it in post. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, sorry. That's my essay.
I mean, that stuff, and I think Kyle was right that we have to really look at it in historical context as well. That those types of scenes, those action scenes, and that kind of thing were really unprecedented. You didn't see that kind of stuff. And then you think about the equipment available and the visual effects, technology at the time, and it can be kind of impressive. But some of it is just so chaotic. It's kind of like, what's happening here? And maybe it doesn't matter.
Right.
Because all that matters is, something started this. There's this crazy, cool, chaotic thing. Because there's some pretty cool moves in there. They do some pretty cool stuff. And I was laughing. I was getting a real kick out of when they were jumping through the windows in the hospital.
Oh, yeah.
Because they kept on going back and forth through windows. Like repeatedly back and forth. And
we saw that in Hard Target, remember? Like, he kind of pulls that off in the final fight scene in the what was it, float storage area or wherever it was. Yeah. With Lance Hendrickson. They kind of take some cues from Hard Boiled in that.
And then I also liked the move where he gets kind of knocked over. It's in Hard Boiled too at the beginning. I think it's in the tea room scene. I think he kind of gets knocked over sideways over the railing, and then slides down sideways and is shooting the railing. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool, and that's kind of a classic.
Oh yeah,
moment in those films.
Now,
and so some of it is very entertaining.
Yeah,
it is an orgy of violence.
It is absolutely, and I want to say real quick. I really love the move in The Killer where he kind of does a roll flip as the boards.
Which
under
roll
him.
flip?
I believe it was Chow Yun Fat. He gets like shot at, and he does this roll flip, and the boards and everything below him, like kind of they don't explode, but get hit by bullets and everything flies up. Some of the moves are just like wow. Like, I know no human can do that in real life, but just wow, we're living in this hyper reality. All right, let's go.
Yeah, it seems very hit or miss what will or won't kill you in a John Woo movie.
Right.
People can get shot multiple times and continue fighting and say they're okay. A guy gets shocked to death and is brought back and is fighting again in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
I mean, but the aim on some of these people too, to be able to land 2 shots in a guy's eye socket in the dark.
Yeah.
That's craziness. And the fact that he doesn't die right away, has enough to crawl around and do his flop down in the straw.
And I don't know if it was,
insane.
I don't know if he was shot in the eyes or if the bullet grazed his eyes.
Boy, I don't know. It's pretty gnarly looking.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, God, I forgot where I was
painful.
going to go with all that. Yeah, it's, I mean, you're living, when you turn on a John Woo movie, you know you're going to be living in a hyper reality. You know, there's no doubt about that. But I don't know where I was going with that. I lost my train of thought. I'm drinking Bullet Bourbon, I should point out, in
Very nice.
honor of our bout tonight. All right. Do you guys have anything else to say about directing?
Did anybody catch that they use the same bridge twice in both movies?
What? Really?
Yeah,
Same
there's
bridge.
there's a scene where do you remember the scene where they're doing the arms deal in The Killer, and the police walks up on them and is like, "Hey, what's going on here?" And it's like, "You called the cops." That whole scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. That same bridge is in Hard Boiled. I'm trying to remember what there's another rendezvous on that bridge.
Oh, is it when he kills the guy that snitched?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, they are in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
I mean, they're both set in Hong Kong, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
yeah.
thought
Too much of a
especially in
stretch.
The Killer, John Woo made Hong Kong very pretty.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in The Killer. Hard Boiled, I didn't notice it as much, but in The Killer, he really seemed to have a love for shooting that city.
Agreed. All right. Let's put it to a vote. Tom.
I'm actually gonna go with The Killer. I thought that was I thought the choreography and the direction was a lot better in that one.
Okay. Gabe.
I think I'm going to go with Hard Boiled in particular because of that sequence, that long take in the hospital. Because I thought, you know, with all this chaos and everything, that there was one moment that really truly seemed kind of planned out and was really kind of cool to watch. And that, to me, that was it. So I'm going to go with Hard Boiled.
All right. Kyle.
Oh, I want to vote for The Killer out of spite because John Woo Clive Cusslered himself into the story, and I don't like when writers or directors put themselves in as a helping hand in a movie. I just can't stand that. But I got to go with Hard Boiled. I think it's his evolution of a director, and you see his launching point into Hollywood by making this crazy movie just full of mayhem and violence. And I think it's kind of close, but I'm going to go with Hard Boiled.
Okay. And I'm going to go with Hard Boiled as well because I absolutely love that movie. Just real quick, I forgot it in the writing trivia, but there was a famous detective, and I cannot remember his name now. But anyway, he's a detective that Dirty Harry was based on, and Bullet from the Steve McQueen movie was based on. Tequila is actually somewhat based on him as well. Like they're all three inspired by this one detective.
A real life detective?
A real life detective. I'm trying to find it because I didn't put it down in my trivia and I was trying to remember it. But so there's 3 instances that this detective, I'll look for it during the next round, which I'm starting. But anyway, let's go back to trivia. Directing The Killer. This was the first film where John Woo used the dove symbolism. He has used it to similar effect in Hard Target, Face Off, Mission Impossible 2, and Paycheck. Because it was so hard to get permits, some of the footage for Tony Wang's assassination scene was shot under the pretense that director John Woo was doing a documentary about Hong Kong's annual dragon boat race. Woo shot the bulk of the footage 5 months earlier and brought in a small crew later to fill in the gaps. Woo ended up editing the scene himself, which took 3 weeks. Woo is a huge fan of musicals and tried to think of the sequence as a musical number or dance sequence. He even edited it in time to the soundtrack. Sorry, guys. I'm fighting whatever Tosh has, too. I keep wanting to sneeze.
You guys got to stop making out.
I know it. But he's so tall and clear. During the filming of the scene in which Tequila is running down the exploding hallway with the baby, John Woo wasn't satisfied that the explosions were big and frightening enough in the scene. According to Woo, in his Dragon Dynasty DVD interview, he asked the special effects technicians to reset the explosives and give him the trigger. When Chow Yun-fat ran down the hall, Woo immediately set the explosives off, nearly incinerating Chow, who barely made it. According to Woo, Chow Yun-fat exclaimed to the producer afterwards, "John's trying to kill me, John's trying to kill me." When Woo heard Chow screaming, he went up to apologize to Chow and saw that the back of his head and coat were in fact singed from the explosions. I was going to say there were some pretty close calls in that, I think, for everyone. And I had this as extra, but since it's talked about in this category, during the hallway shootout, when Yoon and Alan get in the elevator, the crew was given 20 seconds to clean and change the set outside, the elevator doors, so that it looked like a different floor. Because of the shooting schedule, the crew only had one chance to perform the continuous take during the gun battle in the hospital. The hallway shot in the hospital was put in to break the monotony of filming. It was set up in about a day and a half. The crew had to all sit in one little room and watch the action via a series of monitors strategically placed along the hallway. Steadicams had proven to be too heavy, so John Woo had his cameraman use handheld cameras. And the shot lasts 2 minutes, 43 seconds. Well, there you go. All right, let's move on to our fourth and final round, which is overall. I just have to say, I've always enjoyed these films, and I will continue on enjoying these films. I know they're not for everyone, but for me, there's just something about them. And I can still remember watching them down in radio and TV class on a Saturday, because we went in and had to shoot some stuff, and then afterwards we just sat down there and watched either Hard Boiled or The Killer for the first time I did anyway, down in one of the edit bays. And it just, there's something about him. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's Woo's style in how he directed and edited the films, but I don't feel that way more or less about some of his American films. I think he had one arm tied behind his back a lot of times and doing, when he came over to the U.S., and I think it didn't work in his favor. Also, in overall, we usually talk about soundtracks. I own the Hard Boiled soundtrack, and I know that there's one song that is really overused in the movie, but I really like that song for some weird reason. The Killer soundtrack, I don't know, it didn't really register with me too much. I know that he actually used some music from other films to put into that because they were having problems with some of the other music. So I don't know. I really, really enjoy these films. And I agree with you. There's times where I'm like, well, that doesn't make much sense. But since I'm a big fan, I just bless you, whoever that was.
I believe that was my girlfriend.
Uh-oh. She's been making out with Tosh too.
oh no, I need to go.
All right, that's the last we ever saw of Gabe.
All right, go ahead, guys. I'll just keep singing praises, and I don't need to do that. So whatever you guys want to throw in the overall.
Well, you mentioned the music, and I wanted to talk about the music just briefly. I thought in Hard Boiled, the music to me was reminiscent of, maybe it was a Schwarzenegger film, maybe Commando or something like that, and sometimes Lethal Weapon with the saxophone kind of thing. Yeah, I thought, and then if I remember right, The Killer was a little bit reminiscent of kind of like Terminator type music, the first Terminator, in some ways. I'm not sure that I think the music stood out more in Hard Boiled to me than in Killer, because I kind of remember the music from Hard Boiled, whereas in The Killer I can kind of vaguely hear what it was like, but it reminded me of like Schwarzenegger action movies at times, and then other times like Lethal Weapon with the like the bluesy feel to it.
Well, James Horner's music from Red Heat is used throughout The Killer.
Oh,
That's
really?
what I was
Really?
looking for. Yeah, as well as cue from
Legally?
training sequence of Hero and the Terror. The director of Red Heat is Walter Hill, who was later going to remake The Killer before he pulled out. Oh yeah.
I think both soundtracks suffer from what I like to call way too much jazz. One of the things John Woo apparently loves is jazz music.
It is. It is.
Because boy howdy, does he put a lot of jazz music in these two movies. And I am not a fan.
I like jazz. I just don't like that jazz. Like, I mean, I can handle Miles Davis and everything else, but that jazz clubby stuff, and it's such an important part of Hard Boiled because of in The Killer, it's such a big part of it. So,
Right.
Because half the movie takes place there, but I mean, the music wasn't particularly remarkable to me. It just kind of helped date it even more, I think. So,
Yeah, very, very much so.
Oh, and to let you know, where is it? SFPD homicide detective Steve Tachi, who has gained fame and as the lead investigator in the Zodiac homicides. That's who Bullet, Dirty Harry, and Tequila are based on. Kind of taken from. Someone agrees.
Jill found that fascinating.
that's awesome.
All right. Do you guys have anything else you want to add in the overall? At all?
I think the movies suffer from looking back in time at them.
Yeah.
It's hard seeing everything we've seen now to kind of judge them maybe in a fair light. I think at this time they were probably unlike anything else being done in the action scene. But so much has come post John Woo that it was kind of hard for me to take them in their little time capsule.
Right.
So I remember enjoying them more when I was younger, for sure.
Yeah.
And I got that too when I was watching it. I was like, oh my God, I really would have liked this when I was 16 years old. And I don't know. I mean, I'm 40 now and I've got 4 kids, and it's really hard for me. And I've changed a lot because it's hard for me to watch these really, really violent scenes right now, knowing that, this is going on somewhere probably right now.
Right.
And it's, I don't know. I mean, it actually kind of, I don't want to say it's repulsive, but it pulls me back and completely pulls me out of the movie anymore. I mean, and I'll admit I haven't even seen Hateful Eight yet because I'm worried that I'm not going to be able to get into it like I really want to, like I did with Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs. So it's sad.
Well,
Young Tommy is dead.
Well, in these two movies, I can totally see that. But for me, they're more comic booky, like what Kyle said. It's more comic booky violence. Whereas, you get the Tarantino violence. And, once again, we've always talked about the Saving Private Ryan factor, where it is such a good movie, but there are scenes in it that are just so hard to watch. So it makes it difficult for you to want to rewatch it, even though you do. For me, the more realistic violence is harder to handle than this comic booky, like, oh yeah, this is definitely fake, but I'm enjoying the crap out of it kind of violence. But I totally see where you're coming from, Tom. And real quick, I wanted to bring up the fact that the boss in The Killer, how many times can that son of a bitch be shot and not go down? I mean, really? He was shot hundreds of times and did not die.
Well, it's so
you
funny.
can get shot in the neck. You can get shot almost anywhere.
Right. He just would not die.
The gratuitous overkills in these movies were insane.
Oh, yeah.
People getting shot in the head, then getting shot 2 or 3 more times. Like, what's the point? I don't understand.
Right.
Guys unloading 100 bullets into a guy. I can't imagine how many rounds were fired in these movies.
Oh, I'm going to tell you here in a little bit.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And also, just, I always watch in action movies how many times people reload, and both of these films suffer from that, but at least they still kind of show some reloading. They don't show all,
Some,
but
yeah.
I am
That's
a
a
stickler.
tenuous. That's a really
Yes.
shaky ground to stand on.
And I think it's
Because
also the
they
way
suffer from convenient reloading.
right, and also I mean the way Wu has the film edited, where he slows down, scenes or shows you multiple angles of it, so it looks like they're firing more than they are, but still, I'm like, okay, yeah, that gun definitely would have been out like, I don't know, 50 rounds ago. It just totally would have been gone.
Well, and then the times that they actually do run out of ammunition are highly convenient
Yes.
for the story,
Yep.
And yeah, that's one of those things where, after the first John Woo action sequence that you see, you just learn to like not worry about that.
Right.
I'm not really worried about the real life technicalities of reloading these guns, because it clearly is not the point.
No, exactly. I mean, I agree with that. And another thing that drives me crazy in films is someone pumps the shotgun, and there's not a shell that gets ejected. Which I was watching with Tequila in Hard Boiled, and I want to point out that he did not cock that shotgun unless he had already fired. So I thought that was kind of, okay, hey, good for you. But I mean, I see it in so many films where they're like, okay, let's go, and it's like, you should have a shell hitting you in the face right now.
Yeah, unless I suppose it's the first,
yeah.
depending.
I
Maybe the
suppose
first
if you
round.
don't put one in the chamber to start.
Right.
Right.
But boy, that may just be an accident that worked out.
Exactly.
I just don't think John Woo gives a shit about whether or not the guns need reloading. I guess he just talked and said, it doesn't matter to the action.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just skip it. Because otherwise they'd have to reload every 5 seconds.
Right.
For the amount of fire they put out.
Absolutely, yes.
They'd have huge Deadpool-like duffel bags full of ammo, carrying them around. I mean, it'd be ridiculous. They have auto ammo cheats. That's what this is.
All right. So are you guys ready to hear how many rounds were used? I've got it for, I've got it for both films. All right. So we'll start with The Killer. John Woo had over 90 days to shoot the film, which was nearly double the amount of time that the average Hong Kong film was to shoot in the late 1980s. So usually a film would wrap within, 45 days, and he went 90 days. Body count in The Killer is 120. While filming the shootout at the beach house, 20,000 rounds of ammunition were fired. While filming the final shootout at the church, 40,000 rounds were used.
And that, I assume that counts like all takes and everything.
Yes.
Stuff that we don't necessarily see.
Right.
In order to get that scene in the can, they used 40,000 rounds.
Right.
Roughly.
And for Hard Boiled, the budget, I couldn't find a budget for The Killer. The budget for Hard Boiled was only about $4 million. The film took 123 days to shoot. Body count 307. More than 200 guns were used in the film, all of which were real. Due to Hong Kong's strict gun laws, the weapons had to be imported specifically from England and inspected by the HK police before they could be used on set. The production also had to import a substantial quantity of blank ammunition. In total, over 100,000 rounds of blank ammunition would be fired during the filming of the movie. 100,000 rounds. That is insane. That's a lot of brass.
Yes, it is.
A lot.
Maybe John Woo's name gets around after The Killer, but I bet during The Killer, some warehouse thought there was a typo. They're like, what do you mean, 60,000 rounds of ammunition? I don't understand. Did someone put an extra zero? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. If you guys don't have anything else to add, we can start a vote for the final round, and I'll kick it off. I'm going to go with Hard Boiled. Just hands down. I think it is John Woo's apex of action films. Kyle.
I think Hard Boiled suffers in the story department when you compare it to The Killer. But it seems like an evolution of John Woo and what he really wants to do, right? So what he wants to be as a director, which is the guy who pushes the limit for what's possible with action. And I'm going to give it to Hard Boiled for that, because I think it's closer, he's getting closer to achieving his vision of what he wanted to be.
All right. Gabe?
Well, we often talk about rewatchability in this round, and I think I would, having seen them again after a long time, like we said before, I wasn't overly impressed, but I wouldn't say no to watching either of these again. Mm-hmm. They're enjoyable enough that I would watch them again, and maybe almost for comedic value at times. But which one would I choose? Which one would if I had to pick one? I think I would go with Hard Boiled. I think, because I'm gonna go with Hard Boiled.
All right, Tom.
And I'm gonna go with The Killer. I just thought the hospital stuff, and not the action scenes in it. That part was pretty awesome, but just the stuff with the babies and like. I don't know. I like the way they tied the babies up with the blanket. I was just waiting for one of those babies to slip out of it. It's like,
right.
This is a really shitty job tying this. That's nitpicking, but that's kind of where I'm at. So I'm going with The Killer because I thought the story was a nice homage to Charlie Chaplin.
There you go. This is a little extra. The statue in both police stations is of General Quan, or Guan Yu, a soldier from over 1,000 years ago, whose bravery and loyalty has made him like a god to cops and gangsters alike. In Hong Kong, every police station has a shrine dedicated to Guan Yu.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to our recommendations while I tally the votes. And we will start it off with, you know what, Tom?
Yeah, thanks. That's great. So... My recommendation, it's the worst Mission Impossible movie, but it's the John Woo Mission Impossible movie. So I watched both of these, and then I kind of went with the idea that I should go back and watch Mission Impossible 2. So I watched Mission Impossible 2 this afternoon. And it's corny, and it's cheesy, and the lines suck, which is surprising because it's written by Robert Towne, allegedly. But I still think it's a decent Mission Impossible 2 movie. It very easily could have destroyed the franchise and ended it. And as we know now, they've made 5 and they're working on the 6th one. So it's not a horrible movie, but compared to Mission Impossible standards, it is the worst one. But it's got all the little John Woo things, and it's got some really great action scenes that are so polished, which I think these two movies lack.
Right.
So my recommendation is check out Mission Impossible 2 because there's some good woo in there.
All right.
Good woo. Woo.
Kyle.
John Woo.
John Woo. Kyle.
He's never heard that before.
Oh, it's my turn. Oh, God, I'm so unprepared for this. So what have I been watching lately? If you have never seen the entire first season of Preacher on AMC, and I recommend you check that out. I'm not sure, honestly, where it's available, but it's what I've been watching lately, and I'm enjoying the hell out of it.
All right.
It's called Preacher?
Preacher, yeah. Based on a Garth Ennis comic book, and it's created by Seth Rogen and his, I think it's Evan Goldberg is his
that's correct.
Co-creator on that. Yeah. And stars,
Dominic Cooper.
Dominic Cooper, yes, who's great awesome. As Jesse Custer. Just great. It's such an enjoyable show to watch.
Huh. I've never heard of it. I'll have to look into it.
All right. Gabe.
Well, I'm going to go with a director and a movie that were probably, although I didn't fully look this up. Maybe not. Maybe this was just coincidental. But that were probably inspired in part by John Woo. I'm gonna and Mike, you will appreciate this. I'm gonna go with El Mariachi by Robert Rodriguez. If you've never seen that. It's really a testament to independent filmmaking and the desire to just do it. And it is very much kind of along the same lines, just crazy, over the top, action sequences. With a lot of shooting, a high bullet count, a lot of squibs, a lot of flying blood kind of thing. And it's clearly the movie that launched Rodriguez's career and led to another pretty good one along the same lines, which is far more polished and very entertaining, and that'd be Desperado.
Yeah.
So,
I thought you were going to say Spy Kids.
No, I've never actually seen any of those.
I own them.
I've kind of intended to, but I've never actually seen any of them. But yeah, I think El Mariachi was probably inspired by John Woo type of action, and then was perfected in Desperado. So if you haven't seen either of those, go see them.
Good pick. Yeah, we did El
I wanna
Mariachi.
watch
In
Desperado
fact,
again.
oh, Desperado's so good. We in fact did El Mariachi a year ago to the month. We did it last year against Reservoir Dogs.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It was exactly a year ago?
Yeah, it was in January, I believe so.
Very nice.
I think I'm right.
Timely.
I might be right.
So
yeah,
timely.
very timely. Mine is going to be, and gosh, I can't remember what I've suggested, but I'm going with one that was actually mentioned, Bullet. I love Bullet, starring Steve McQueen. It was made back in '68. It has one of the greatest car chase scenes ever shot on film, and it was really ahead of its time in that fact. I mean, I love this movie so much. That's what's on my license plate, and hopefully one day I'm going to have a green Mustang just like Steve McQueen drove in the film. It stars Steve McQueen, Robert Vaughn, and Jacqueline Bisset. So check it out. Oh, and Robert Duvall's in it, actually, as well. He's kind of in everything. But Bullet, 1968. Check it out. All right. Let's find out who won. Or actually, you know what? Before
do
that,
you have picks too?
what's that?
Did Tosh send you some?
He did send me some picks, and I need to tell you guys what they are. It just dawned on me. So Tosh sent me an email in his fever dream. He went director John Woo, winky face. He actually picked The Killer because John Woo became John Woo with this film, which I agree with. Writing, hard-boiled. Acting, hard-boiled. Overall, hard-boiled. Like my eggs. Albino out. And those are Tosh's picks.
Did he send you a movie picks?
He did
As a
not.
recommendation?
He did not. Did he send them to you?
He did not, but
Okay.
he did send a statement that I'm obligated to read because I said I would.
All right.
So bear with me for a moment. He says, "Dear 11 more people that download this episode because I'm on it."
Oh, God, here we go.
He's such an ass.
Yes. You can tell this is actually written by Tosh. "I am sorry that you can't start the new year with the other white meat. Once my angel-like voice returns to full strength, I will be back to disagree with Tom on whatever he likes. Love, the Great White Hope. P.S. Hansel and Gretel was not bad the second time I watched it." Wait, it's not done. Oh,
Yes,
who am I kidding?
you're done.
It's still shit.
Wrap up the show, Mike. Wrap up the show.
Now, I want to point out, I don't think we discussed this. When Tosh was on the last time, Tom actually sent him a copy of Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters, didn't you?
On Blu-ray, by the way. I didn't want him to complain about the image quality or anything like that. So
I have to say that is one of the greatest things ever. So thanks for doing that, Tom. All right. Well, we hope Tosh gets better. Or
Do
we
we?
don't. Yeah. Well, okay. There's a few of us that do. And a
are we
few of us
voting on that too? Because
All right. Let's find out who won. I'm going to poke the monkey.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Your winner by decision is Hard
I don't know why I do this.
One thing that we didn't mention is Hard Boiled actually the inspiration for The Departed?
No, actually, The Departed.
Is it the Infernal Affairs?
Infernal Affairs it was based on. Yep.
I think it shares some cast in common with Hard Boiled.
It does. I don't have that up right
It
now,
does.
but I know it does. All right. Let's move on to where people can, I don't know, get in friendly gunfights with you. We'll start with Kyle.
Hey, I wasn't expected to join a podcast, but hey, I'm here. So I should probably build some sort of social media presence for myself. So I will just consider it a work in progress. Right now, if you're listening to this, you're probably already my friend on Facebook. I don't know how many listeners you will have, but I'll try to get something up and running. Yeah, check back later.
All right. Thanks, Kyle. Gabe.
That was awkward.
Don't worry about it, Kyle. I've been doing this for what? Is this our 6th year now beginning?
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't have any kind of presence built up, so don't worry about it.
6 years, 1 month.
Yeah. You can find me on Facebook if you care to, and you can also check out films that our 48-hour film team has made at onegenomeshort.com.
All right. Thank you, Gabe. Tom.
I'm on Facebook. My work is on Vimeo, but people can generally find me at my local tea house picking bullets and bird poo out of my Earl Grey.
And you got a little cough there. Have you been making out with Tosh too?
No,
Man,
I wanted
around.
I ran out of water I ran out of water like 10 minutes into the episode, so I'm like dying to go get a drink of water.
All right, we'll try and hurry this up for you. All right, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can see all of our films, which Kyle is in some and has written some. On YouTube. Just type in Southsider Studios. You can find all our films there. And for the show, we would appreciate it if you could leave us a review on iTunes or whatever podcasting service you use. You can contact us at cinesmack@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Just search Cinesmack. For February, we celebrate the month of love with French Kiss versus Forget Paris. Woo, we're all stoked for that one. So,
Those are good movies. You know, I sat through your John Woo shit. Start this episode over. I've got some shit I need to air.
so for Tom, Gabe, Kyle, and myself,
Don't speak for me.
Thanks for listening, and go catch a flick.
Don't do it.
Starring Chow Yun Fat, Tony Lang, Moon, Lung, Leung. Fuck, Tony, get a better name.
If you didn't want those 2 movies next month, you should have said something.
The only reason we chose them is to get off porn.
And scene.
This has been a test of the Southsider Studios podcast system. This was only a test. If this were a true lack of entertainment, your head would explode. Go to iTunes and subscribe to our feed. Just search Southsider Studios.